The scratching started on the third night. David pressed his palm against the bedroom wall, feeling for vibrations. Nothing. Just cold plaster and the faint mustiness that permeated every room of the old Victorian he'd bought for a pittance. The real estate agent had called it a fixer-upper with character. What she'd meant was, nobody else wanted it. The scratching came again, deliberate, rhythmic. 3 slow drags, then silence. He checked his phone. 3:47 a.m. Always between 3 and 4. Always in the walls. Rats? He muttered, pulling the blanket to his chin. Just rats. But rats didn't pause like that. Didn't wait, as if listening for his reaction. By day, the house seemed almost charming. Sunlight filtered through dust motes in golden shafts. The hardwood floors creaked pleasantly under his feet. David threw himself into renovations, scraping wallpaper, replacing fixtures, anything to avoid thinking about the nights. He was in the basement when he found the door. It was behind a shelf unit he'd assumed was built into the wall. When he'd moved it aside to check for water damage, there it was. A narrow door, maybe 5 feet tall, painted the same gray as the concrete walls. Easy to miss, deliberately hidden. The doorknob was ice cold. David's hand hovered over it. Every instinct screamed at him to leave it alone, to push the shelf back and pretend he'd never seen it. But he'd bought this house to escape his old life. The divorce, the job he'd lost, the apartment that had felt like a cage. He'd bought it to start over, to stop being afraid. The door opened with a groan that seemed to come from deep within the earth. Beyond it, darkness. Stone steps descending into nothing. The smell that wafted up was wrong. Not mildew or rot, but something organic and stale, like an exhaled breath held too long. David's flashlight beam couldn't find the bottom. He pulled the door shut. His hands were shaking. That night, the scratching was louder. It moved through the walls of his bedroom, circling him. David sat upright in bed, tracking the sound as it traveled from the east wall to the north, then overhead. It stopped directly above him. 3 slow drags, then something else. A sound that made his blood crystallize. Breathing, wet and labored like someone drowning on dry land. "Who's there?" His voice cracked. The breathing stopped. In the silence that followed, David heard something that made him question his sanity. Footsteps. Not above him or beside him, but inside the walls. Walking slowly, deliberately, getting closer to his room. They stopped outside his bedroom door. The doorknob began to turn. David couldn't move. His body had become stone, his breath trapped in his lungs. The door inched open 1 centimeter, then 2. Through the gap, he saw nothing but darkness. A darkness that seemed thicker than the absence of light, more like a presence unto itself. Then he saw the fingers. They emerged from the gap, gray and elongated, the nails black and split. They curled around the door frame with a tenderness that was somehow more terrifying than any violence could be. "David," something whispered. His name stretched out, syllables pulled like taffy. "David, why did you open the door?" He ran, grabbed his keys, his phone, nothing else. Fled down the stairs and out into the October night in his t-shirt and boxers. The grass was freezing under his bare feet. He made it to his car, fumbled with the keys, finally got the door open, and saw the figure in his rearview mirror. It stood in his bedroom window, backlit by his lamp. Impossibly tall, impossibly thin, with a head that tilted at an angle that necks weren't meant to bend. It raised one hand and pressed it against the glass. Then it smiled. David spent the night in his car outside a 24-hour diner, shaking and watching the sunrise. By the time the morning commuters started filing in, he'd almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. Stress, isolation. The house was old. The sounds had a rational explanation. He needed his wallet, his clothes. His life was in that house. When he returned at noon, everything looked normal, peaceful even. He laughed at himself as he walked through the front door, his fear evaporating in the mundane daylight. The basement door was open. He hadn't left it open. He was certain he'd closed it. David stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring down at that gray door, now ajar. A faint light emanated from within, a sickly green phosphorescence that pulsed like a heartbeat. He should leave. He should get in his car and never come back. Instead, he descended the stairs. The door swung fully open at his approach, as if welcoming him. The stone steps led down into a chamber he hadn't known existed. A room carved from the earth itself, the walls covered in something that looked like scratches but, as his eyes adjusted, revealed themselves to be words. Thousands of words, scratched into every surface in a handwriting that devolved from neat script to manic scrawling. Don't open the door. It waits. It knows your name. I tried to leave, but the house won't let me. It wears my face when I sleep. The final message was written in something dark and dried. I'm still in the walls. David's flashlight flickered. In that strobe of darkness and light, he saw them. Dozens of scratches on the chamber floor. Deep gouges arranged in sets of 3. The same pattern he'd heard through his walls. The same pattern now coming from behind him. He spun around. The doorway was blocked by a figure, his figure. It wore his face, his clothes, his expression of abject terror. But the eyes were wrong. Too wide, too aware. I've been waiting for you to come down here, it said with his voice. The house gets lonely between tenants. But don't worry. The thing that wore his face smiled. You won't be lonely in the walls. He stepped forward. David stumbled backward, tripped over his own feet, fell hard. His flashlight rolled away, its beam illuminating the chamber's far corner. There he saw the others, the previous owners, their faces pressed against the stone as if the rock had captured them mid-scream. Not paintings, not carvings. Their mouths were open, their eyes were moving, tracking him. Trapped in the walls, the thing with his face knelt beside him. The real David is already upstairs, it whispered. He's been there since you opened that door. I've been wearing you, living your days. Did you really think you could leave last night? It laughed, his laugh but wrong. You've been in the walls all along. David tried to scream, but the stone was already cold against his back, already pulling him in. He felt the rock pressing against his face, his chest, felt it hardening around him like cement. His fingers clawed at nothing, leaving 3 long scratches in the chamber floor. 3 slow drags, then silence. The real estate agent showed the house 6 months later to a young couple. It's a fixer-upper with character, she said brightly, leading them through the rooms. What's that sound? The woman asked, pausing in the bedroom. Old houses settle, the agent assured her. Pipes, probably, or rats. But it wasn't pipes, and it wasn't rats. In the walls, David scratched his warning. 3 slow drags against the plaster, and listened to the couple's footsteps fade toward the basement. The door was open again. It was always open,